Let's talk about the Chiefs, man. The development side, yeah, and what is happening there. Where we see a lot of players are coming from, their lower ranks, graduating to the first team, but we don't see performances week in, week out. We do see glimpses, of Mfundo Vilakazi where they show equality. We do see glimpses of, a or Shabalala, showing equality. We do see Ongosindipile Ngcobo, showing equality, here and there, but it's not consistent, you know. And the answer is why? Why are these players that we all know that equality corner is there, but consistency is not there? Consistency is lacking. What might be the problem? And to me, that answer is simple. Chiefs has to fix what's going on with first team for me, because when these players graduate, for example, let's say Mfundo Vilakazi, Chiefs does not have a right winger who is left-footed, who is performing week in, week out, who is either scoring goals or assisting. They don't have a left-footed right winger, or even on the left who is consistent. Reliable, yes, but for me, not a. So when a player like Mfundo Vilakazi graduates, a lot is on his shoulders. He is expected to perform every week. He is expected to score goals. He is expected to give assists. And I believe that pressure, for a young man can be a lot, because same thing with Shabalala. He's a number 10. He's expected to be a creator. He's expected to score goals, because if he doesn't, who's going to do it? You understand? And other teams, even abroad, when you see a player graduating, it's not an instant thing where the player is expected to perform now. The player is given a chance so that he gets used to how, or to get used to the level at the Silver Premiership, and then, they get introduced now with less pressure. You don't want to give, a pressure, to young players. For me, I think that's what is killing, these players with Chiefs, because these players are expected to score goals, are expected to assist, are expected to perform at a consistent level, of which I think, it's difficult for these players, because if they don't perform, there's no one else who's going to perform. It's different for other teams where if you don't perform, someone else is going to perform. Now, if you don't perform, you know that the team is going to be under pressure, because no one else will do it if you don't do it. If Lilliput doesn't score goals, Shabalala must do something. Fudo Vilakazi must come from the bench and do something. And that pressure, for me, that's what is killing these boys, because at that age, you need to assimilate with the first team. You need to play with guys that, even if you make a mistake, and miss a big chance, someone else is going to score that goal. You're not going to miss a chance, and then the game is just going to be about, if you score that goal, boy, we would have won the game. If you don't score, someone else must score. You are a young player. You are learning, but I feel like these players, the Chiefs, are not given the chance to grow, to learn, to make mistakes, because every time they make a mistake, it costs the team. And now these players are not as expressive, are not as lively as they were when they were playing for ETTC, because now they have a lot of pressure on their shoulders. If you don't score, someone else, is not going to score, and the media is going to focus on you. You should have done that. You should have passed the ball there. You should have, scored. You should have assisted. You should have crossed the ball. You should have done this. You should have done that. And it shouldn't be about that with these young players. It should be about, we see that, okay, this boy is good at this. Where can he improve? Where can we help this boy to become better? So that when he now dethrones whoever is in his position, he can give us more. Now the boys are expected to give more. Zisuwaj, and I think, that kind of pressure, it can, destroy. Let me not use the word destroy, but it can, weigh a player down, and I think that's what is happening, man. We Kaizer Chiefs, and if these Chiefs is not careful, they're gonna lose a lot of talent, because of because of what is happening. And I do believe, that these players, Shabalala, Umfundo Vilakazi, Kosini Peter, there's a lot of quality. Mashiane, bro, they are gone, Jabulo Blom, but the pressure, Zisuga nje, you're expected to do, wonders, as a young player, and I believe that as a young player, you should assimilate to the first team first, and then, you will be expected to perform. Not every player is mentally strong to say they take responsibility, every game, week in, week out, like Abo Mufukeng, he takes responsibility. Even if the team is not performing, but he can say, I will win the game for my team. Not every player is built like that. Some players need time, and I think with what is happening to Kaizer Chiefs, these players are not given time. The fans, expect these players to do something now because no one else is doing it. If they're not doing it, unfortunately, and I think when initiatives is looking at their problems, they should consider also trying to sign quality, so that they can have that quality, perform week in, week out, and then they can have players now where this quality is not performing, they can substitute, quality start, substitute, until this boy is ready to dethrone this one and take that position and make it his. You understand? So if they don't do it like that, then I think, graduating players, it's not gonna look lucrative anymore. They will want now to start looking at ready-made products. They won't want to graduate players, because to them it's not working. To this point, it's not working. Let me say consistently. It is working for certain games, but in a consistent basis, it's not working. So I think James man must try and fix whatever is going on with first team. Then I'm pretty much sure that when these players are graduating in a good team, a winning team consistently, then it will be easier for these players to join the first team.